A road trip to Arizona, to Pipe Springs National Monument. This serves as a watering oasis for American Indians, Mormons, ranchers, and it includes historic forts and Winsor Castle, beautiful gardens, and a ridge trail. Come along and join the adventure. Welcome everyone to Weekend Escapades. Today we are in the Arizona Strip at Pipe Springs. And this is the visitor center sign. Mormon missionary Jacob Hamlin undertook the first of his missions to the Hopi tribes in 1858. Stopping at Pipe Springs, explorer John Wesley Powell first visited Pipe Springs in 1870 between his trips down the Colorado River. Powell and Hamlin traveled across the Arizona Strip, contacting the Indian tribes to promote peace with the settlers. Powell's topographical survey crews stopped at Pipe Springs several times in the early 1870s. But it was in 1863 when this location really took shape with James Whitmore. He was one of the first Mormons to move sheep and cattle into the Strip. He acquired title to 160 acres around Pipe Springs, built a dugout and corrals, and planted an orchard and vineyard. The following year, Navajo Indians began raiding Mormon livestock on the Strip, and in 1866, Whitmore's stock was stolen. During an attempt to recover his livestock, he and his herdsmen were killed. This resulted in several revenge killings between Mormons and Indians, and in 1868, Mormon militiamen built a small stone cabin at Pipe Springs as a stronghold against continuing Navajo raids. A nice little place with shelter, little piece of wood in the middle, put food or whatever they gathered to eat. A very simple way of life, but of course, pioneers and modern settlers that came from the east and came out to the west thought that they were primitive and savages and tried to take all this away and modernize them with not only religion, but of course a new way of life that they thought would be better. Now this fort, built I believe around the 1870s, this fort was built originally to protect them from Native American raids, and as there were a couple, it didn't see as much action as they thought it would see, as that was a very short-lived period of time. But one of the things for sure is this ended up being kind of a sanctuary for polygamists, and at the end of it, that's exactly what this was, as the government was not very fond of that. As a matter of fact, polygamy was frowned upon about the same as slavery was frowned upon. It was considered to be a very big blemish, polygamy and slavery. As you can see why both would be, but this fort did house and protect some people that were still trying to practice that. Now, this over here is like the holding area from the springs. You can see it here. Probably less water running right now. It's very cold, but this over here is where the spring, this was built right over the spring, the fort, and so it runs right out here underneath. And I'll tell you, it doesn't appear to be running at all right now. But that's where the water would come out. And this would water all the cattle and keep this area green, and that's why it was so important. Probably had as much value as, of course, gold would have in those days. Water in the desert, extremely important. Extremely cold and the doors are closed. I wonder if this is actually open today. That's strange. Hope so. But take a look at that. That's the Arizona Strip right there. Now the Kaibab Indians, they lived in this area, and they went all the way to the Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon right out in that area. So that tribe lived here and occupied a tremendous amount of space. And this was that water source for the whole Arizona Strip, and that's why it was so valuable. Now this was the home to the Native Americans. But when the settlers came in, they wanted it because of the water. They had to have it for all their cattle and their needs. And so they basically just took the area and left the Native Americans with no water source and ran them out to look for different locations. They wanted to impose on them they thought was a better way of life and religion, and it wasn't such a good mix. They didn't agree with that, but at the same time, with no water source, they had to attack once in a while and, of course, kill the livestock and try to make their point that they wanted their land back in this area. So that's what happened, and that's where we're at right now. So high desert grasses once covered the range before us as far as the eye could see, and for centuries Paiute people made the seeds of those Native American grasses. They turned them into a staple in their diet. Even the animals hunted by the Kaibab Paiute. What they did was they hunted grouse, rabbit, and antelope that lived on the nutrient-rich grass. And then in the 1860s, thousands of sheep and cattle were put on the range. And what this did was really kill off that grass and ran all of the potential game that Native Americans ate out of the area. Now this area here, we're going towards the west side, like bunkhouses. They were just dilapidated, fallen down, and they've preserved them. But these old buildings have dirt roofs, lodgepole, and stone, the way they're built. All right, so we are in the location where they would have stayed. This is really nice. It's a lot warmer in here, actually. Lodgepole ceilings and mud on top. Which you would think in the bad weather or rain that it would wash away. Maybe it did, but I think it made like a hard clay and the water just ran off. Because there's snow up there now and it's melting, and I don't see any moisture at all on the ceiling. And fake foods on the table. But this was all, again, falling down, and they rebuilt it, and they did a great job. You could literally live in here. It's really comfortable compared to the temperature outside. Look at the way those beds were made. You can see a bedroll just being rolled out there. Warming up your boots by the fireplace. What a simpler way of life to live and build a home like this compared to what you have to do now with building codes. That's why homes are so expensive and probably not as sturdy. This on the table right here, you can see the sickle, but that right there is a leather gauntlet, and it says that the gauntlets were worn to protect their wrists from like brush and rope burns, usually made of leather. Cowboy gauntlets seem to have originated in Texas and declined in popularity after the 1900s, but what happened is that would protect them from rope or things like that, from roping cattle, and then of course the sickle or anything sharp. And if they wore them over their boots and things, it would stop all the long brush and things that they had to go through with their horses from getting all slashed up. I could see where that would be a great idea. Now this down here by the corrals and stables, this is the, I would say, east side buildings. And these were in really bad condition. Very similar to the others, a little bit lower to the ground, I'd have to say, shorter. But let's take a look inside these. As you can see, the way this is built, and I think they were able to of course keep their horses right here for the fort, and building is exactly the same as the other ones, but again a little bit different, being that it had this kind of breezeway in the middle. See if we can get in here. A couple of them are closed. So this is the says here, Pipe Springs National Monument. What you're standing in was built by the guardhouse, or built as a guardhouse in 1868 by the Mormon Militia at Pipe Springs. So this was actually the guard posts that were built here. And they rebuilt these, but oh man, look at the webs hanging there. But this is one of the guard posts. There's one fireplace at this end, and then of course nothing over here. But in the middle of it, there's a big breezeway kind of a thing, storage. Maybe they kept horses in there. Now it says when they, I'm going to get back out of this place here, but what happened was the Mormon militia was called out whenever there was a Native American raid. They would call out the militia from this location, and then they would go attack, or of course try and stop that raid or attack that raid. Now we've looked at the other forts, Fort Pierce, and it was an outpost. The building probably built similar to this, but there was no roof on top of the of Pierce, Fort Pierce, the last video we put up. But this one, of course, is the actual fort. And hey, they've got the fort open. We're going to go head in there right now. Let's head in.
The whole director was operational from 1871 until about 1888, when a telephone was installed.
Oh, okay. I remember seeing something about it. There's a wiring insulators.
Yeah. Really cracking down on plural marriage as an institution. And so this building was used as a hideaway for plural wives during the anti-polygamy rates of those decades. So designed as a fort, used as a ranch house and a telegraph office, and eventually as a hideaway for plural wives. So kind of the 1,000 lives of Winsor Castle here.
Things that are here, of course, weren't with the fort, but they are from the same time period. Old sewing machines and wash tables. Interesting little potbelly stove, but it was all it would take to keep a room warm this size. And of course the windows, the way they were built, you can see they were built so that you could shoot from left to right, but yet not able to be a big target from the outside, but yet you could see a pretty good distance from here. So all the windows were built to where you could shoot out of them. Again, it is a fort. Give you a closer and a better example of that right here. See how that window's built? Gives you an angle both directions to be able to see. Old roll top desk. Here's an example outside the room. This would be outside, and you can see how this was built. Same as the other ones, I'm sure, but the other ones are kind of stuccoed over to make it smooth inside the house. Nicer fireplace here, spinning wheel. My grandmother had a pump organ just like that, and it actually worked. The bellows were still good. So now we're downstairs, and this is where they made cheese. As you can see, they milked about 80 to 100 heads of cattle or cows per day. You can correct me on cows and cattle. I've been corrected before. And that's what they did. And so those dairy products. And of course for that, a lot of it sold in St. George. And a lot of the cattle and things I heard were used for the tithings for the church as well. Well, this is where the water would come out and run. And this water was necessary, of course, for the cheese and production that they had here. Oh, sorry, the camera's blurring. But right there is where the water would run. And right now what they said is the water tables are a little low. The water still runs, but now they pump it. And the pump is broken. Now this is the original inside of the wall. They've got it framed off in glass. You can see that. But that's the original wall. And then of course they covered it up, I guess. Made it smoother. But again, there's places where you could shoot. It is a fort. All these areas have the windows, gun ports. And this is how they would have stored the cheese and goods over here. You can see it. And also nice and cool in here. Some fake pieces of meat. And a whole side of what looks like beef over here. You can see all the production would have been done here, the churns. Places to make the cheese. Nice fireplace. Oh, there's a pretty nice, the way they've smoothed out the walls, the way this looks. It would be easy to live in a place like this. Of course, you had to sweep, not vacuum. But imagine that floor stayed nice and cool in the summertime. So this fort, the stones of this fort, you can look how they're cut. In 1870, 1860, 1870, let's take a look right here. 1863. These stones were quarried right behind us. On the trail that's right behind us, all these stones were quarried there. And then had to be wagoned or carried down from the mountain. But every fort that we see, the stones are always quarried right next to the fort. So fairly genius. I mean, this is a lot of rock work, a lot of stone work. So right up there is where they were quarried from, on that ridge trail. How long must that have taken? That's a lot of stone, a lot of work. Can you imagine now you go to build something, you got to go to Home Depot or Lowe's, be able to build something. Not these people. They looked at the ground and said, you know what, I'm going to cut stone. I'm going to cut stone and I'm going to take some trees and some lodgepole and I'm going to build myself a place called Winsor Castle. That's it. Genius. And a lot of work. Just had to get a little closer to the wagon. 1800s, mid-1800s wagon. That wagon could tell stories. The things that it has done and been and seen. And there's the old wagon with Winsor Castle right behind it. That might be the thumbnail. Keeping in the Old West wagon theme of things. This would have been the traditional covered wagon. You can see the wood arches that would have held up the canvas on this one. What do they used to call those? A schooner? Am I correct in saying that? If anybody knows, let me know. But would that be like a prairie schooner? Is the ones that were covered wagons? For some reason, I want to say that is correct. But I'm sure some of you know. And if you know, let me know. This is kind of south of the castle. We'll see what's down here. There's a lot of lodgepole built up down here. We'll see what this is. There's a little placard down here, but interesting. It almost looks like a garden area. So not today, but in the spring, I imagine, summertime. This area right here was where they grew the native plants. So the plants you see all around you, which we're not really seeing any because it is winter and snow is on the ground. They are the latest generation of spring-fed cultivation, of course, gardens, I guess. So they're spring-fed cultivation gardens in the desert that stretch back more than 10 centuries. The ancestors of today's Kaibab Paiutes used water from the spring to grow small-scale gardens of corn, beans, squash near here. They also gathered and ate many seeds and greens from a variety of native plants. So what they've done is just kind of made this a garden to grow some of the traditional foods that they had in the area. But again, we're not going to see it today because there's snow on the ground. Well, this is part of the garden area as well. You can see there's some trees out here. But right now, all the garden is growing is snow. But that'll change in spring. Maybe we'll come back out here when the things are green and growing and take another look. But for now, we're going to conclude in saying that this is a beautiful location. We really enjoyed it. Haven't seen it in the snow. A lot of fun, a little cold. But until the next adventure, goodbye from Weekend Escapades, and we'll see you in the next one. There's some crows flying around out there, and a giant tree with no leaves.